I pulled into the driveway just as the morning light kissed the dew-damp grass and felt a chill of foreboding when I saw the half-finished structure looming like an eyesore on what was unmistakably my property. My blood pounded as I stepped from my truck and flicked open the leather-bound folder at my side. Inside lay the original deed handed down through generations, every line and signature testifying to my rightful ownership. Yet before I could savor that triumph, I heard the shrill scream Jerry Lee. HOA Queen Mallory, rotund and radiating self-importance, stormed toward me in her stretched blazer, her heels sinking into the soil she'd appropriated. "Get off my land, you trespasser!" she shrieked, her cheeks flushed with indignation as if ownership were her birthright rather than a myth she'd constructed with petty bylaws. I closed the folder slowly, letting the corners tap against my palm before lifting my gaze to meet her fury. "You built this shed without permission on my land," I said, voice low but unyielding, eyes narrowing. Jerry Lee jabbed a manicured finger at the boxy frame behind her. "These HOA rules give me the right to expand communal storage anywhere I see fit." She spat as if quoting scripture, but I knew there was no clause granting the board permission to trample private deeds. Hush fell over the small crowd of curious neighbors drawn by her tantrum. They shuffled uneasily, torn between loyalty to the HOA and unease at Jerry Lee's brazen overstep. I unfolded the deed and held it aloft like a banner. "It clearly states my property line extends to the old oak tree," I said. And across the blueprint she clutched I traced the faint pencil mark showing her shed overlapped by several feet. "My land, my rules," I added, eyes sweeping the silent onlookers. But before Jerry Lee could retort, a new figure emerged from the gathering shadows. Old Man Patterson, stooped yet fierce, carried a battered toolbox. Rumor had it he once served as a county surveyor. Decades ago he'd measured these lots with precision. No one expected him to side with me until now. He stepped forward, voice gravelly under his breath. "I remember staking these corners myself," he declared, dropping the toolbox to the ground and unrolling a yellowed parchment showing his original survey markings. The crowd gasped as his expert stroke confirmed my deed's boundary lines. Jerry Lee's mouth snapped shut as if handcuffed by her own hubris, her face drained of color, lips quirking in a quake of suppressed rage. But the real twist came when her own vice president, Mr. Chen, the quiet architect who designed her beloved HOA community center, stepped into the clearing with measured calm. He approached Jerry Lee and slid his phone across her palm. On the screen glowed an audited transcript of meeting minutes proving that no board vote had ever authorized construction on private parcels. "Bylaws require unanimous vote for any structure outside designated common areas," he explained, voice steady as steel, "and you failed to secure that vote." Jerry Lee's eyes flickered between the phone and the deed, her empire of regulations collapsing like a poorly built deck. She opened her mouth to sputter but no words came. Then I motioned toward my bulldozer parked at the edge of the yard, its engine idling in patient anticipation. Her jaw locked in horror as the massive steel blade gleamed in the dawn light. Neighbors exchanged glances, some eager to see justice served, others uneasy at the thought of property destruction. But the truth was clear: this was my land, and no amount of entitlement could overwrite that. Jerry Lee swallowed hard, tears brimming as she glared at the deed. "This isn't over," she hissed through clenched teeth, yet the gavel of reality had already fallen. I climbed into the Dozer's cab, feeling the familiar rumble beneath me, and extended a hand to Old Man Patterson. "He's with me," I told the gathering crowd, nodding to the surveyor beside me. With a low growl the Dozer advanced, jaw dropping to crush the illicit shed in slow motion. Retribution. Timber splintered, concrete cracked, and the structure groaned as it surrendered to rightful authority. Jerry Lee covered her face, stifling sobs that echoed louder than any triumphant cheer. The moment the last beam crumpled, silence enveloped the yard. The shed lay in ruins, a testament to how entitlement crashes under the weight of truth. Neighbors approached cautiously. Some offered nods of respect, others stared at Jerry Lee with hard pity. I climbed down from the Dozer, dust settling on my boots, and retrieved the deed from my pocket. Holding it out to Jerry Lee, I said, "Learn it, know it, respect it." Her hand trembled as she reached for the paper, but I withdrew it swiftly. This was not a gift, it was a lesson. She collapsed onto the grass, her sobs turning ragged as she realized her power had been nothing more than hollow declarations underlined by fear. I turned and addressed the watching crowd. "My home is open to none who disrespect its boundaries," I said, voice carrying across the silent property. "Let this be a reminder. Titles and bylaws are worthless without honor and the rule of law." As I walked away, neighbors parted to let me pass, their murmurs swelling with admiration and relief. But even as my footsteps faded, the lesson lingered in the morning air. Jerry Lee would rebuild But this time she'd face the bitter taste of accountability. Half of the story remains untold: the aftermath of her fall, the community's healing under new leadership, and how even the most entitled Karen can be humbled by a single deed. And a Dozer readers, when entitlement collides with justice, who do you believe should prevail? Share your stance below. Julia's footsteps faded as she walked away from the rubble of Jerry Lee's ill-fated shed. But the echoes of that day reverberated through the neighborhood far longer than the splintered timber beneath the dozer's blade. Word of her decisive reclamation spread quickly, carried on the hum of conversation at the corner coffee shop, and the excited chatter of children giddy over the spectacle. By midday, the HOA board, formerly Jerry Lee's kingdom of compliance officers and clipboard enforcers, had convened an emergency session beneath the very oak tree that marked Julia's property line. Councilwoman Ramirez presided with quiet authority, flanked by Old Man Patterson and Pastor Thompson, each wearing expressions that balanced stern resolve with a flicker of mercy. The first order of business: Jerry Lee Hastings's permanent removal as HOA president. The motion passed unanimously, as if her own bylaws had finally come home to roost. Jerry Lee arrived at the meeting in clothes stained by tears, clutching the deed Julia had eventually shared as a painful token of accountability, rather than a weapon. She stood before her erstwhile allies, her voice cracking as she offered a trembling apology. "I lost sight of why this community exists. I let rules overshadow respect, and for that I'm deeply sorry." Silence fell, so thick it seemed to muffle even the rustle of leaves overhead. Then Pastor Thompson rose and invited Jerry Lee to join the committee tasked with rewriting the HOA charter. It was an olive branch forged in the fire of her own hubris, a chance to transform from oppressor to advocate, to learn that leadership is service, not subjugation. In the weeks that followed, Jerry Lee walked a path she had never imagined: knocking on doors not to issue fines, but to ask neighbors what they needed. She discovered that Mr. Nguyen struggled with uneven sidewalks after his hip surgery, and helped arrange for volunteer repairs. She learned that Mrs. Hernandez's wildflower garden not only brightened the street but supported dwindling bee populations, so she organized a pollinator protection group. Each small act chipped away at the bitterness that had hardened her heart, and over time even the harshest critics nodded at her efforts. Meanwhile, Julia's spare yard, once home to the rogue shed, bloomed with a new purpose. She invited neighbors to help design a community tool shed built squarely on common land, with transparent walls and communal ownership. Volunteers painted murals that told the story of that pivotal day, and children scrawled hopeful messages on reclaimed boards. Respect lines, share light, and together we rise. The tool shed became more than a repository of hammers and rakes. It was a symbol of collective stewardship, a physical manifesto against unilateral entitlement. As autumn fell, the street held a harvest festival beneath strings of lanterns powered by solar panels salvaged from the deconstructed shed. Julia's son led a parade of lantern-bearing families, and Jerry Lee stood beside him, her arms full of donated produce she had collected on foot from neighbors' gardens. They smiled at one another, an unlikely pair bound by confrontation and reconciliation. When dusk cloaked the festival in gentle lamplight, Pastor Thompson offered a blessing over the gathered crowd. "May this community forever shine brighter than any dark force that seeks to divide us. May we remember that power wielded with compassion transforms lives more than power wielded with pride." As the final embers of the bonfire flickered out, Julia and Jerry Lee joined hands to extinguish it together, an act that spoke of unity stronger than any broken rule. In the years to come, their story inspired neighboring towns to audit their own HOA practices and to champion reforms emphasizing empathy over edict. Julia's deed and Jerry Lee's redemption became case studies in civic leadership courses, reminding future generations that the most potent authority springs from consensus and kindness. And every year on the anniversary of the Great Shed Showdown, the neighborhood gathered beneath that oak tree for a lantern walk, each light a testament to the conviction that when truth meets resolve, entitlement crumbles and compassion reigns. Readers, when the dust settles on conflict, what do you believe matters most? The letter of the rules or the spirit of the community? Share your perspective below.